Hi, everybody. Welcome to HMH's Future of Transportation podcast. I'm John Halpin, and on this show, we have a regular series of chats with experts in the transportation industry. Joining me today is Dr. Ann Goodchild, founding director of the University of Washington Supply Chain, Transportation, and Logistics Center, which launched the Urban Freight Lab in 2016 to, quote, bring together the public and private sectors to address the challenges of the urban freight system by engaging in innovative research, according to the website. The partnership brings together, quote, private industry, academic researchers, and public transportation agencies to solve urban freight management problems that overlap private and public spaces and have wide-ranging benefits. That's a mouthful, and I was rude by not saying Dr. Goodchild. Thank you so much for joining me. I appreciate you being here today.
Good. No problem. Good morning. Thanks for having me.
So before we dig into the details, can you describe why confronting urban freight issues is so important?
Yeah, thanks for the question. We often skip over that, I think. I guess it's, for me, primarily because 80% of Americans live in urban areas. And so the reality of urban freight is what we experience every day. So if it's sort of if we have a congested network, then as we try to move around, that slows us down. If we have noisy and sort of obstructive vehicles, then that's what we walk past, or that's what we experience on a daily basis. If it's a struggle for companies to sort of operate profitably, then that's something that eventually we all experience in increased cost of goods or less availability of products. So I think by improving the urban freight system, we make life better for everybody in urban areas.
Okay. How'd you get involved in this, by the way?
Well, I've always been fascinated by freight transport. When I was a little kid, I wanted to be a truck driver. I think that was more about being like, I had this impression you could sort of be master of your own little domain, and that looked really appealing to me. But I also just have always been fascinated by like big, complex transport problems. So, I remember very vividly the first time I rode on the subway in Washington, D.C., and looking at the map and imagining, gosh, how do they get all those people, where they want to go? And realizing when I sort of first learned about the mail and about FedEx and how it just fascinated me that kind of complexity could operate so quickly and so efficiently, and I wanted to learn more about it. So I've just always been drawn to those sort of distribution problems, complex. They're incredibly like quantitatively challenging, yet also so we touch them every day. So that's really exciting to me.
Okay. Let's talk more about the Urban Freight Lab. The Urban Freight Lab developed what you call the Final 50 Feet research program. Can you, before we start digging into the details, can you briefly explain what that program does?
Yeah, so the Final 50 Feet it's really the sort of out of vehicle element of the distribution system. And when we really started digging into urban freight, and for the most part that's distribution, right? Because most of what we need in cities are things to live and to supply us, and most of the time major producers aren't the primary residents of cities. But so we can talk about sort of delivery problems. That there's been a lot of attention. So we started digging in. We were, wanted to make an impact, wanted to make sure we understood the problem really well before we sort of selected which problems we were going to research. And really what we noticed there was that this out of vehicle time was most of the time, that in order to sort of get vehicles moving more quickly, the biggest bang for the buck was actually in reducing out of vehicle time. And there's been a lot of focus for decades. You could argue that it's even longer than that, around sort of the vehicle, right? And even the word, the last mile, most people think of vehicles. They're still thinking of where does a truck go, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's good. We've made a lot of progress. We've improved efficiency there immensely. But we it sort of happened to the um, and our drew our focus there. Whereas there's a ton of time, there's a ton of cost in the out of vehicle time, particularly in urban areas. Like the majority of a driver's time is actually out of vehicle. It's funny we call them drivers because driving is not what they're doing most of the time. Most of the time they're walking. And so we saw that there was an opportunity there to study that part of the problem. It hadn't really been the data hadn't been collected and shared. It hadn't really been sort of explored. And we gave it a label, right? We called it the final 50 feet. The alliteration is good. It's not literally 50 feet, but it also emphasizes, how that's different from the last mile. The geographic scale is much smaller. And it's much more complicated. It's not, it's owned by multiple people. So it's not
Mm-hmm.
just a road, right? It's a sidewalk and it's a staircase and it's a security process at the door. So it's there are many people involved in it. It's quite complicated, and that's why we needed to create the Urban Freight Lab, which is this community of those stakeholders. We have real estate developers, we have retailers, we have carriers, we have technology providers. So it's this sort of messy suite of people who all play a role, and we saw the need to bring them together to really do better and solve some of those final 50 feet problems.
Okay. So the two goals I saw on the website, reducing dwell time and reducing failed first delivery rate are of the Urban Freight Lab or the Final 50 Feet program. I may have those mixed up a little bit. Um, is reducing dwell time, like when I started researching what you do, and there was talk about decentralizing distribution centers, things like that, and I know we'll talk about that a little bit more. Reducing dwell time seemed easier than reducing a failed first delivery rate in my uninformed head, I guess. I looked and I said, okay, reduce dwell time. Well, you have smaller vehicles, you bit less congestion, easier to get in and out. Boom, done. Is it that easy? I know that's an oversimplification, but why is it an oversimplification?
Um, Okay, so I would just correct a couple of things. One is our original goals were to reduce dwell time and failed first deliveries, but we recently modified those. So we felt it was really important as a group to define a small number of quantitative measures that we were going to use to evaluate ourselves and our progress. A lot of times when people talk about a problem, they continue to talk about it at this very general level and sort of fail to get to, okay, well, what are we going to do about that, and how do we know when we've done better? And so we really, but yet, picking metrics can be kind of painful because there's so many challenges and there's so many other important things, right? And by sort of picking two and not picking others, people say, well, but what about this? And what about this? And what about this? But we really wanted to emphasize progress and,
Mm-hmm.
sort of accountability. So we picked two. That doesn't mean that there aren't numerous other important measures that I welcome, people to focus on and study and improve. But so and also we chose these measures on an annual basis. So we weren't
Mm-hmm.
saying that for the rest of time these are the only two things that matter in urban freight. But we
Right.
thought, we're a small group of people. We have a year. We're going to pick a couple of measures that matter to us that we can define, and we're first going to evaluate where we stand now. We're going to generate some ideas for how we could do better with these measures. We're going to do those things, and then we're going to see how far we got. So, it's, I think, more about the importance of sort of setting goals and measuring yourself than it is saying these are the only two things that matter in urban freight. And as I mentioned, we have adjusted those.
Okay.
So yeah, dwell time and failed first delivery. So the reason I think that we came to those was A, that they were measurable. that if
Mhm.
we set out and we collected some data, we could define what those are, and we could, say it's 12.2 minutes. I'm making that number up.
Mhm.
And also that we did have we were bringing together a diverse group, but we could all agree that those two measures were important. So there might be some additional measures that mattered more to our carriers, or that mattered more to our city partners, or that mattered more to our retailers. But these were two measures that everybody wanted to reduce, because all of us, it's a waste for everybody. And I think I can say that with absolute certainty when we have failed deliveries, right? No carrier wants to have to do 3 times as much work to get you your package.
Right.
No city wants to carry 3 times as much traffic to deliver the same number of goods. No individual wants 2 failed attempts before they finally get their package. So everybody, it's good for everybody if we can reduce failed delivery. So that was one reason so that it was a thing we could measure, we all cared about, and we could find some ways to do better on that. And similarly with dwell time, nobody wants longer dwell time. No carrier wants it, no city resident wants it, no city government wants it. So those are two things that everybody could agree, were goals that we all collectively shared, and we've reduced them. It was better for everybody. And so, how easy is it to reduce those? That's not really a measurable thing. I mean, if I said one was easier than the other, I don't know what that would really mean. I why are they hard? That was really where the final 50 feet comes in. I mean, it depends a lot on sort of where you are. It's not that hard, like in my neighborhood where the driver just pulls up in front of my house, maybe parks, in the street, runs up
Same.
my stairs. That's probably a 24-second, delivery. But it's much more difficult where there's a key code access to a building, and it's not functioning today, where there's a locked a concierge that you needs to sign for the package, and they're not at the desk that morning. So it depends a lot on where you are, kind of how difficult those things are to reduce, and then who needs to be engaged, what are their motivations, what are the things that you're trying to implement. So no, I don't have an opinion about which one of those is easier to do. And I guess if you made me pick one of them, I'd probably say failed first deliveries was actually easier to fix.
Okay, so the way you've described the failed first deliveries, it it sounds like a lot of the issue is on the recipient side, which is difficult for you and your partners to solve, right? So what I mean, you can't do a lot of
When you say it's on the recipient side, what are you imagining?
the concierge who might not be there, the keypad that doesn't work. You can't the entity delivering the package or whatever it might be can't do anything about that, right? So what can you do to improve things?
Oh no, they can. I mean, they can install a locker system, a lockbox. They can have an alternative if, like, they can require you to provide some alternative delivery locations. Like if one isn't available, they can not offer signature delivery. They can um, they can create a locker system that they deliver to. So, I mean, it does affect the choices that you have as a customer
Mm-hmm.
and the flexibility you have, but it's by no means the only way we could do things. But actually a lot of failed deliveries come from mistakes in the address. So like it says suite 200 and there is no suite 200. So I wouldn't say that the majority of them are that there needs to be a person there and the person's not there. There's quite a mix of things that cause failed deliveries.
Okay. Um, how did COVID affect how you look at this? Did COVID change things, or did it just sort of exaggerate them and shine a bigger spotlight on them?
Yeah, it's a real mix. I think one thing that's um, it definitely has shined a spotlight on delivery services and almost like kind of justified them. I think that, there might have been a sense before like, oh, you don't need uh, like it's a lower priority, say for a city.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas I think with COVID, it made clear that a lot of small businesses might depend on delivery services. Local restaurants might depend on them. Um, it's maybe it helped see that it's very broad cross section of city residents that need these services, whereas maybe before people thought, oh, these young people, they like to order things online. So yeah, I think it sort of normalized delivery in a lot of ways, and moved it from something that might have been considered lower priority to something that was deemed essential and necessary. Um, and so in some ways that's sort of, been has reduced the number of like conversations that we need to have where we're trying to convince people that they should be thinking about urban freight. Um,
Right.
but also COVID has, it's sort of physically for a while it's been sort of physically harder to run experiments. Having data collectors out on the street and making sure that
Mm-hmm.
they're safe, or interacting with drivers. Sort of, we've always done a lot of sort of observational studies where we watch drivers do their work. That's been harder. So, some of the physical work that we do in terms of data collection or installing equipment has been harder. I also think decision making from a lot of our partners, our research partners, has been just sort of slowed and in some ways really changed. I mean, the logistics industry has been working their tails off to keep you feeling like you have all the things you need, literally working their tails off for the
Yep.
last year and a half, under just challenges at every corner. The availability of labor, the availability of product, the shifting demand, um, different sort of economic and regulatory conditions, and yet people continue to eat, people continue, to live, and so it's sort of honoring and acknowledging that our partners have all been in the middle of like real, I don't want to say crises, but just the need to absolutely focus on their day-to-day business and to be creative and like to pull in new vehicles and do things differently with drivers and change the way they operate entirely. So they've been less focused, say, on you know uh, the future and a bit more focused on what are we doing tomorrow, because there's now a new regulation that we need to adhere to. So I think that's also just been, we've been trying, we're often like asking, can you tell us about this and what's happening with, are you buying these new vehicles? And we sort of had to just give them space for the last year and a half as they
Yeah.
kept all of us going. They kept all of us going. That whole industry has been working overtime.
Yep. Absolutely. Um, okay, so one specific project that you're working on is a micro hub in Seattle. It's basically it's a small urban distribution center for delivery. It basically gets packages closer to their destinations. It's not coming from the big warehouse out near the airport necessarily. It's going to a smaller one, which theoretically would become many smaller ones closer to where they need to be. What's the most? Is there most common delivery mechanism from those? Is it a cargo bike? Is it a small van? Is it someone on foot? Or is it a mix of all of them?
And you forgot to mention it's super cool.
Yes, it's super cool.
Yeah. Well, we're running the most common one at our hub is an electric assist cargo bike. Um, but it's really we're really in the mode of experimentation. So really, the our urban freight lab is involved in this because we our partners want to test new ideas.
Hmm.
So that's what we have to do right before we get to, oh, now we know the solution, it's going to be walking, or now we know the solution, it's uh, robotics. So what we're doing is providing a space to test under what conditions, how does sort of walking compare to a cargo bike in terms of the number of packages we can deliver in this area every day, the cost of that, the labor requirements, how uh, how does what we can envision a cargo bike delivery system, but when we put it on the ground and we run it, does it operate the way we expected that it would? What are the unexpected obstacles that this bike has that we didn't foresee when we sort of imagined it? So it's very much experimental, and it's not. We want to bring in a range of options and give our partners a chance to more quickly and more cost effectively test those things. And I think we're also like trying to bring the idea of experimentation into logistics. I think as soon as like collectively as people, like as soon as people sort of recognize there's a challenge, it's like, okay, what's the answer? And
Hmm.
we maybe forget that there needs to be a period of like learning and experimentation. And if we try too hard to jump to the answer, we're probably going to not get the answer quite right. And so yeah, in general, we want things that are lower emissions and I think lower sort of community impact. So when we have warehouses that are much farther away from the destination, the economics and the logistics efficiency sort of encourage you to use larger vehicles, right? Because you're coming
Hmm.
from farther away, you can consolidate a lot of stuff and deliver. Yet I think a lot of neighborhoods are uncomfortable with the increasing kind of big vehicle presence in their neighborhoods. Um, and one of those, we want to have a less CO2 intensive logistics system, but I'm also
Right.
really interested in making sure that communities feel like they have a logistics system that they like. I
Right.
feel a little bit like e-commerce, we're all participating in e-commerce, at least the vast majority of us are. Yet we're simultaneously like, hey, how come that truck's riding down my street? And so I think we want to be part of thinking about, well, what do I want? Do I want, my stuff to be delivered in a bike? Am I more comfortable with cargo bikes in my neighborhood? And then I'm more comfortable with my kids being out in the street with smaller vehicles. And so
Hmm.
another thing that we're trying to explore in the Urban Freight Lab is sort of this, well, let's imagine together what the future of our communities looks like in our neighborhoods. And because it's not just a question of economics and it's not just a question of CO2. It's like, what do we want our neighborhoods to look like and to feel like and to operate like? And so we're trying to make sure that we bring in those voices and we have those conversations kind of across each of these stakeholders, because carriers want, to be compatible with communities. And if you look at someone like the postal service, they've been delivering in different ways in different communities forever. And, in some places they ride bikes, and in some places they have walking
Yeah.
deliveries, and in some places they have their little Jeeps. And, being like context sensitive is I think important for helping, for finding the right solution for each place.
So you talked about the economics of it, and if you if you have more people delivering things, then you're paying more people to deliver them. So that's a negative on the economic side. During your testing, in whatever form it may have taken, what positive economic impacts on the retailers or the Amazons or whoever it might be have you found?
Yeah, so you mean if we put things in smaller vehicles, we have to have more drivers?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. We also have, in general, I mean, unless some of those are electric vehicles, like if we're putting more packages in, like if we're ordering 1 hour delivery or 2 hour delivery, and that's like coming to us in an individual car,
Hmm.
that's worse for the environment
Right.
and traffic than if I waited 3 days to get my package. So, I mean, the ultimately, if this is why I mentioned sort of what do we want our communities to look like, and
Yep.
because the fact that we want things quickly and we want a lot of choice is really what creates the traffic and the CO2 from our delivery system. Like if we were all going to decide that we didn't need to eat bananas, right? We can eat other things.
Right.
Um, it would be, we're all fine really if we don't eat bananas. And, bananas have to be grown in tropical areas and they're, shipped around the world. And we do that. We do all that just because we enjoy having choice. And we want to have, um, a nice selection of products that's available to us. The same with sort of the timeline of delivery. We could all wait. We could all wait a week. We used to wait. Um, and we didn't have things available right away. So, a lot of what the logistics industry is doing is it's meeting your demands
Hmm.
as efficiently as they can. And they're trying to do that, right? It's a very highly competitive environment where, they're all constantly trying to sort of reduce the cost that's incurred to get you what you want.
Right.
So, it's a it's always a balance, and the answer won't be what's the cheapest thing or what's the least CO2. It will be what's the most cost effective, given I'm gonna give coffee to everybody.
Right.
Um, so uh, that's the experiment. That's the give and take that retailers and shippers and carriers are kind of constantly negotiating with. And so some of what we're testing, like how are you willing to walk to a neighborhood locker? Are you willing to
Hmm.
walk? Do you actually kind of like walking 2 blocks in an evening, getting out of the house, maybe interacting with a neighbor and picking up your package and going home? If that's actually kind of appealing, at least to some people, then that's a way we can reduce CO2, because the delivery can bring everything to that locker instead of visiting 10 homes. They can do less CO2 production. It's more cost effective for the carrier, and maybe that's a solution that you actually like, because it is kind of nice to get out of your house for a modest walk. It's relatively close. It's there. There's less theft. There's less package loss. It's not sitting in the rain. Where I live, sometimes my packages get left at the door and they get wet. You get an email when it's there. It's secure. It's touchless. So maybe that's a model. And so there's this constant give and take. So, are cargo bikes smaller? Yes. Um, so they're carrying capacity. But there are other efficiencies. It's much easier to park. There
Yeah.
may be a bike lane that you can ride in that actually allows you to travel faster than vehicles who are sitting in traffic. And again, those are the experiments that we're doing. When we actually put a cargo bike on the road in a dense, congested environment, can it actually deliver more packages than a truck? Because a truck is hard to maneuver. It's hard to find parking. The
Right.
intersections are congested. So, but we don't really know until we get out there and we try. And that's, those, so we have some assumptions, but, oh, maybe this will be more expensive, or maybe this will be faster. But we're providing an opportunity for our partners to test and to evaluate those things empirically.
So, Seattle seems to be a willing partner with what you're doing. are other cities? I mean, I know you're testing in Seattle, but do what is the investment a city has to make to become friendlier to? I mean, you talk about bike lanes, for instance. I mean, some cities are better than others about that stuff. Do city would to accommodate things like this? Would cities need to make major changes, minor changes, somewhere in the middle? I know that might be hard to quantify, but is it difficult for a city to say, okay, we're just going to change the way we do this? It'll probably help them ultimately, but there's steps to be taken before you get there.
You mean in supporting urban freight?
Supporting less congestion seems obvious, I guess, but installing bike lanes, partnering with distribution centers, or so that we have more of them, to doing things to help get congestion out. Do they need to do a lot or a little to sort of make that happen?
Mm-hmm. Um, I think there's things that any city or town, right, can do that are um, are pretty impactful, that are not particularly costly,
Mm-hmm.
and I think COVID has shown us that maybe things we thought would be really hard to do can actually be a lot less hard than we imagined. So,
Okay.
putting up uh, food pickup zones, right? Changing curb allocations. So, changing places that we allow commercial vehicles to park, changing the amount of time that they're there, like, is something that pre-COVID was always kind of difficult, because people would argue, oh, I want that space, no, I want that space, and you should pay for that space, and we need this space for buses, and no, we need it for trucks. And so, yeah, I mean, I think that has been for cities quite a challenging, to sort of balance the many demands. But I think one of the things COVID showed us is sometimes, well, actually, I think you could just walk out there and put up a different sign, and maybe and test that, right? So
Yep.
try it out, do that for a month. It's not working, let's try something else. So maybe adaptability, and maybe shifting thinking from, well, we have to get it right, so we have to think it all through, and we have to hear, uh, we have to present it as we know all the answers. I mean, I just would encourage, I think this period has been really difficult. And, that's, I don't want to, like, uh, not sort of honor that, but I think it's
Mhm.
also shown us that, when we need to, we can really experiment, and we can shift, and we can adapt. And we can do that over and over and over again. So, I guess, why are things hard? Maybe is a question to think about. And if it's been sort of, some things are like administratively sort of cumbersome, I think maybe we can try to think in a more adaptable way. And I think we're going to have to continue to do that, because I think
Mhm.
things like climate challenges, very different weather than we were expecting. I mean, those are going to continue to happen. I think COVID itself is going to, we're going to have hotspots every once in a while. Like, we're going to sort of live in a less permanent, I think, less predictable
Yeah.
condition. And so I think all of us, supply chains in particular, which have been really focused on being like lean, and you get that by being predictable, this has
Yeah.
been a shift in thinking, okay, when things are less predictable, we need to be a bit quicker, a bit more dynamic. Um, so I think I think there are things that can be done that aren't that hard. There's also, yeah, if you're, you know, creating a well-connected bike network is a hard, is just expensive. There's a lot of places that don't have much, uh, separated bike infrastructure. And yeah,
Right.
creating an entire network is something that would take a long time. So no, that's not what most people would call easy. But that's not, we don't need, there's a lot that can be done that's not just that. And I think also in transport in general, we're going to need all of the solutions, to be tested and available. So
Hmm.
are we going to use bikes some places? Yeah, but that's not all we're going to use. Are we going to have lockers? Yeah, some people are going to use those in some neighborhoods, and that's great. Are we going to have, um, you know, uh, pickup points instead of home delivery? Yes, and that's going to work for some people. So,
Right.
kind of like how we're going to deal with overall congestion is we're going to provide choices that give
Okay.
people alternatives. And I think the logistics system is going to look similarly. There is not a one size, fits all solution. We're going to have options and alternatives that work in certain markets and work in certain environments, and we need all of those choices.
Okay. Well, a couple more for you. I know we're running a little longer than I thought. I hope that's okay. Um, Two more. So Amazon is the 500-pound gorilla here. They're the biggest urban freight. I mean, they're the trucks that are everywhere, and they're a partner in your program. What are they doing? What good things are they doing to make urban delivery more manageable? Now, I mean, off the top of my head, I'm thinking the locker at Whole Foods. That's an easy one in some areas. What other kind of things are they doing to help this?
Yeah, well, they are the biggest participant in the cargo bike, now permanent cargo bike program in New York City.
Okay.
Um, and I think they will be doing more of that in more places. Um, I think their, climate goals as an organization are very bold, and will have a tremendous impact on CO2 production, and that's very positive. Um, they are shifting the electric van industry, because of their scale, right? When they
Hmm.
say we need 100,000 electric vans, that shifts an industry,
Yeah.
and that accelerates the development of electric vans in a way that others will benefit from. So that, again, that is going to have an impact outside of just their own operations. Um, so yeah, I think they're doing, their their choices are influential, are tremendously influential for their own organization, but will also be, outside of themselves. The other thing they're doing is sort of normalizing having zero emissions goals. And I certainly see, I can't say that that's just because of Amazon, but I think the industry has shifted from sort of thinking about CO2 emissions or sustainability as, a thing some companies do and others don't, to really a very normalized expectation that reducing sort of CO2 emissions and uh, acknowledging the need for more sustainable delivery methods is something that is now not surprising, is part of the discussion, like cost would be. So I think that's very positive, and we obviously need to make that shift as a planet, um, and they've been part of that movement.
Okay. All right. Last one for you, and I hope this doesn't put you on the spot too much. Is there a technology that you look at when with all that you have learned about this? Is there a technology that you look at that maybe isn't done yet? Might be one that's like electric vehicles or electric vehicle charging that's implemented already to an extent, or something that you see coming down the road that's sort of a, I don't know about a game changer, but that you think makes the biggest impact here with what you're trying to do. I don't know if, I mean, it could be. Electric vehicle charging seems like an easy one. Is that the obvious one, or is it maybe technologies that software technologies that make things different? I don't know. I'm just kind of wondering if there's anything that's just sort of makes the light bulb go off over your head and say this is really going to help. This is really going to be a game changer here.
I think there's things that have already totally changed like GPS itself has changed transportation, and because it enables all of our like dynamic location um, and visibility. So, and what's really been reduced by that is inventory. But we can see where things are, and we can change the course of things as they're happening. We used to have to do that before they left.
Hmm.
We can now reallocate a demand, right? And the same way it's completely changed personal transportation and enabled things like Uber and Lyft. Those technologies have changed everything about supply chain. And the fact that we find ourselves here where we can buy, arguably anything we want at any moment and get a ridiculous amount of it very quickly is because of the investments that have already been made in sensors, and GPS sensors being certainly one of those, and kind of information management, and then communication, so sending that information from place to place. In that technology is why we've seen already this tremendous transformation. I
Yeah.
mean, completely unrecognizable. So and it's funny, I think those things are less people. It's like that's the backbone, it's like that's the infrastructure that's made this stuff, our lives, different. But I'm not sure, kind of like infrastructure is often overlooked, I'm not sure people really get that, and that's been happening slowly for decades with investments from logistics companies. Looking for, so like, what's a robot? What's a self-driving car? I mean, it's a series of sensors and communication systems, and that can be put together and operated with enough speed to do the job. So I guess ultimately I'm breaking it down, more to those pieces, and they've already changed what we're capable of. I'm not, I guess, so I think electrification still has a long way to go. Yeah, do we
Yeah.
have some electric cars? Yeah, but we have not made a meaningful dent in the vehicles that are doing commercial goods distribution, and we need to do that.
Yep.
So I think we are on the cusp of seeing a significant shift, and I'm looking forward to that. I'm impatient for that. So I think that, I think largely that will be the same kinds of vehicles we recognize, right? Vans, cars, small, the range of truck sizes. It's fun to think about these very small, kind of cute, more robotic devices. They seem to capture people's attention.
Hmm.
But if you look at the total, like, miles traveled by goods, they will still be in, consolidation is still a good strategy for saving money, saving CO2,
Yep.
being efficient. So, that last mile is sort of visible to us all, and it comes into our communities. It, comes onto my property. So I think, it's sort of more personal, and people are more invested in it. And
Yep.
there we'll see, some more bikes, some more small vehicles, some electric vehicles, some more, self-driving things. But the key technologies that are really going to reduce CO2 and maybe allow us kind of to already do this online shopping and home delivery and do that cost effectively, are, I think, these backbone technologies that are making it all possible.
Gotcha. Okay, I think I need to let you go because I've been I would love to ask more questions, but maybe another time. Folks, so Dr. Goodchild, so basically for people to find out more about what you're doing, I guess the best answer is to Google the Urban Freight Lab, right?
Yeah, we got lots of stuff on our website. We're always putting stuff on Twitter and LinkedIn and Facebook. So yeah, Google us. there will be ample interesting things you might come across.
I agree. If you're into logistics, folks, I have poked around the website a lot, and there's a lot of great information there. So you should definitely check it out. All right, Dr. Goodchild, thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it.
It was a pleasure.
All right, folks, if you enjoyed the show, please subscribe and leave a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever else you are watching or listening. It'll help us get the word out, and we'd appreciate that. To learn more about HMH, the Transportation Transformation Agency, visit us at hmhagency.com or find us on all your usual social media platforms. For Dr. Ann Goodchild, I'm John Halpin, and thanks for listening. We will be back soon with a new episode of the Future of Transportation podcast.